They said humanity had no right to defy the stars. The Galactic Empire, vast and ancient, had ruled countless worlds long before Earth ever launched its first colony ship. They called us newcomers, upstarts who didn't understand the weight of galactic law. But when they came to take our colonies, burn our skies, and erase our voice among the stars, they forgot one thing. Humanity does not kneel. Not to empires, not to gods, not to anyone. It began quietly. Signals cut off from the frontier, trading routes collapsing into static. At first, Terran Command thought it was interference from the nebula storms near the edge systems. But then came the distress calls, barely audible through the noise. Colonies under siege, ships torn apart by Imperial fleets. The Empire didn't send envoys or warnings. They sent fire. They wanted the Terran Republic erased from every map, every archive, every memory. On Earth, inside the deep chambers of Terran Command, the highest council met in silence. The air carried the hum of war. Drones transmitting data, holograms flickering with images of ruined cities and lost lives. No one spoke until the Supreme Commander finally stood and said what everyone feared. They mean to close the galaxy to us, forever. But humanity had been closed off before, by oceans, by mountains, by its own fears. Each time it broke through. The order that followed became the most controversial command in Terran history. "By fire and will," the commander said. "We will not retreat. We will forbid the Empire itself." The words rippled through every Terran ship, every soldier, every home still clinging to hope. The meaning was simple. No empire, no law, no ancient power would dictate the fate of humankind again. Fleets mobilized from Mars and Europa. The colonies that survived sent what they could. Miners became soldiers, engineers became tacticians, and farmers piloted drones armed with plasma torches. The Terran Navy wasn't the largest or the oldest, but it carried something the Empire had forgotten long ago, a reason to fight that wasn't born from conquest, but survival. In the dark of space, where stars shimmered like silent witnesses, the first Terran counterstrike began. A single carrier slipped through an unstable wormhole, emerging near the Empire's border world. No grand speeches, no warnings, just silence, and then light. The Empire's outpost was gone within minutes. Word spread faster than any ship could travel. The humans had struck back. The Empire's response was immediate. Entire armadas shifted course toward the Sol system. They called it a cleansing, a reminder of the order that bound the galaxy. But what they didn't understand was that humanity no longer cared about their order. The Terrans had already chosen chaos over chains, and as the first Imperial dreadnought entered human space, its sensors caught a single message broadcast across every channel, every frequency, every star. A voice, calm and unwavering, from Terran Command itself. "You came to close the galaxy to us. Now, we close it to you." The signal cut off. Every Terran ship powered up its engines. The stars themselves seemed to hold their breath. The war that would decide the future of the galaxy had just begun. The broadcast from Terran Command echoed across every corner of human space, replayed endlessly on civilian frequencies and military channels alike. For many, it was a spark of hope, a reminder that Earth still stood, that someone was still fighting. But for others, it carried a weight far heavier than courage. They knew what the words truly meant. It wasn't just defiance, it was a declaration of total war against an empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia. In the outer colonies, the effects were immediate. Trade routes that once carried medicine and food now ferried weapon parts and encrypted data. Entire cities were repurposed into supply hubs. Children learned evacuation drills before they learned to read. And through it all, the Terran emblem, a blue star burning bright against the void, became a symbol of both hope and rebellion. The Empire's response was swift and brutal. Systems that declared loyalty to Earth were blockaded, their skies filled with Imperial cruisers demanding surrender. Most didn't. In one hidden sector near the Perseus Rift, a small Terran fleet gathered in silence. They called it the Iron Line, a desperate attempt to form a defense perimeter before the Empire's fleets reached the inner systems. Among them was a young tactical officer, quiet but sharp, watching the stars on her display. She had lost her home on Vega Prime, one of the first worlds to fall when the Empire advanced. For her, this fight wasn't about politics or pride. It was about not letting anyone else lose what she had. Her commander, a man who'd seen the first contact with the Empire years ago, stood beside her. "They still underestimate us," he said, his voice calm despite the tension. "They think humanity's fire burns fast and fades. They've forgotten what will can do." Back on Earth, Terran Command faced its own war, not of lasers and fleets, but of choices. The Council was divided. Some believed the Empire was too vast to fight and urged negotiation, while others argued that peace had already been shattered beyond repair. The Supreme Commander listened to them all, but said little. He knew the truth that none wanted to admit aloud. Humanity couldn't afford to lose, but neither could it afford to win at any cost. Meanwhile, strange signals began to pulse from deep space, unknown transmissions from regions long thought uninhabited. Analysts couldn't trace their source. They weren't Terran, but they weren't fully Imperial either. Some believed it was the work of other civilizations waiting for the outcome, watching silently to see if humanity would rise or be erased. Others whispered about ancient machines hidden in the galactic core, relics that the Empire had sworn to keep buried. As the Terran fleets prepared for the inevitable clash, whispers spread among the crews. Some said Terran Command had found something, an old weapon from Earth's forgotten past, powerful enough to level entire systems. Others dismissed it as rumor, a myth born from fear. But the phrase, "by fire and will," took on a new meaning, one that even the commanders refused to clarify. The stars along the Iron Line began to flicker with movement, Imperial ships dropping out of warp, thousands of them. The calm before the storm ended in an instant. Every Terran vessel went to battle readiness. Engines roared, shields flared, and for a brief second, as silence filled the bridge, the young officer stared into the dark and whispered, "They're here." The first battle of the Forbidden Galaxy was about to begin, and somewhere deep within Terran Command, plans far greater than anyone imagined were already in motion. The first shots of the war lit up the void like dying stars. The Iron Line burned bright against the endless black streaks of light tracing across space as Terran and Imperial ships clashed. The void became a graveyard of metal and silence. Every hit shook the belief that humanity could stand against such power, yet every counter-strike reminded the galaxy that the Terrans would not vanish quietly. Inside the Terran flagship Resolute, the bridge was alive with sound, alarms, voices, and the low hum of energy weapons charging. The tactical officer from Vega Prime tracked dozens of enemy signatures across her display, her hands steady even as the ship trembled from another blast. The commander's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold formation! We don't give them the corridor!" The crew responded in unison. It wasn't loyalty to command that drove them anymore. It was loyalty to one another. In the midst of the battle, one Terran frigate broke formation, diving toward an enemy cruiser. Its captain's voice crackled over comms, calm and certain. "If they want to close the galaxy, let's show them what a human door looks like." The explosion that followed lit the enemy fleet in violent light, taking both ships with it. The bridge fell silent for a breath. The officer turned away from her screen, eyes hard. "That was Ardent. They bought us a minute." Far from the front lines, the colonies lived through a different kind of war. On Luna, engineers worked day and night to build new warships from shattered remains. Civilians volunteered to test experimental drives, knowing the odds of survival were low. They did it anyway. On Titan, miners dug deeper than ever before, searching for rare elements needed to fuel the new reactors. In the cold dust, one worker paused to look at the stars. "They're fighting out there for us," he said softly. "The least we can do is keep the lights on." Back on Earth, the Terran Council grew restless. Reports from the Iron Line were grim. The Empire had deployed a class of ship never before seen, massive vessels that bent gravity around them, distorting sensors and communication. Some council members feared these were part of the forbidden technology the Empire had sworn to guard. When one of the scientists finally spoke, her voice trembled. "They're not ships. They're machines, living ones. The Empire didn't build them. They found them." The Supreme Commander said nothing for a long moment, then turned to his aides. "Prepare Project Willfire." The word spread like a shadow through the command channels. No one outside the High Council knew what it meant, but every officer understood the tone. Whatever it wasn't a weapon born from hope. It was something humanity had buried for a reason. Meanwhile, in the chaos of battle, the Empire's fleets began to shift. The enemy ships weren't advancing, they were surrounding. The tactical officer zoomed in on her display, realization dawning. "They're not trying to destroy us," she whispered. "They're hurting us." The commander's eyes narrowed. "Toward what?" Before anyone could answer, a new signal appeared on their sensors, massive energy readings deep in the system's heart. Not Imperial, not Terran. Something ancient was waking, and as every ship, human and Imperial alike, turned toward the source, the stars themselves seemed to shudder, as if remembering a name long forgotten. The lights on the Resolute's bridge dimmed as the strange energy readings grew stronger. Every screen flickered with static. The ship's systems couldn't make sense of the data. It was as if space itself had started to bend around something unseen. The tactical officer leaned closer to her console, her voice low. "It's not a weapon signature. It's alive." The commander frowned. Alive? The readings pulsed again, rhythmic, almost like a heartbeat. Then, from the black void beyond the fleet, something vast began to emerge. It wasn't a ship. It wasn't even a structure in any human sense. It was a lattice of light and metal, shaped like a spiral galaxy folding in on itself. Every Terran sensor went blind the moment it appeared. The Empire's fleet stopped firing. For the first time since the war began, there was silence. Both sides simply watched as the object unfolded, its edges glowing with energy older than any civilization. The tactical officer whispered what everyone was thinking. "It's not theirs. It's not ours. It's something else." Back on Earth, the Supreme Commander stood in the dim war room as the live feed struggled to stabilize. The Council shouted over each other, some demanding retreat, others insisting this could be the key to ending the Empire. The scientist from the deep archives spoke over the noise, her tone steady but grim. "We've seen those patterns before. They match the ruins on Mars, the ones we were forbidden to excavate after the first contact treaties. This is what the Empire was hiding. This is why they tried to close the galaxy." The commander's eyes narrowed as realization sank in. "They weren't keeping us out," he said softly. "They were keeping that thing in." On the front lines, the standoff didn't last. Without warning, one of the Imperial dreadnoughts fired on the structure. The beam vanished into its core, absorbed completely, and then a wave of light burst outward. Every ship it touched went dark. Engines failed. Communications died. The Resolute's bridge filled with the sound of alarms as gravity itself warped. "Shut down reactors!" the commander shouted. "Now!" But it was too late. The ship's hull groaned as if the void around it was tightening. In the chaos, the officer clutched her console, staring at the energy readings spiking off the charts. "Sir, it's pulling us in." Through the viewport, the structure loomed closer, spinning faster, its light turning from gold to deep crimson. On the edge of her vision, she saw Imperial ships being dragged in too, their once perfect formations collapsing into spirals of debris. Far from the battle, in a hidden base under the sands of Mars, A quiet voice came over a private channel to Terran Command. "Project Willfire is ready," the voice said. "We can detonate it, but we'll lose the system." The Supreme Commander hesitated. Every decision up to this point had been war, strategy, survival. But this was something else. This was a choice that could reshape the galaxy. "Hold," he said finally. "Not yet." The Resolute shuddered violently. The officer's console sparked, lights fading one by one. "We're losing control!" she shouted. The commander gripped the railing, eyes locked on the growing light ahead. Around them, both Terran and Imperial fleets were being swallowed by the unknown force. And deep inside that light, something began to move. Shadows twisting, forming patterns that almost looked like wings. Every star in the sector seemed to dim, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. The officer turned to the commander, voice trembling. "What is that thing?" He didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the screen, where the last clear image showed the impossible, an ancient machine waking from its slumber and the galaxy trembling in response. The light that filled the Resolute's bridge grew so bright it felt alive, pressing against their skin, vibrating in their bones. Then, just as suddenly, it vanished. The ship was silent. Systems flickered back one by one. The officer blinked, her hands shaking over the console. "We're still here," she whispered. But her relief died as soon as the radar came back online. The Empire's fleet was gone, thousands of ships erased from existence as if they had never been there. Only fragments of metal drifted in the void. The commander moved closer to the viewport, his face pale. "They didn't explode," he said softly. "They were taken." The structure still hung in the distance, its shape shifting slowly, like something breathing. It no longer looked mechanical. It looked alive, aware. And then it spoke. Not in sound, but through every ship's comms at once. A low hum echoed inside their minds, forming words that didn't belong to any known language, yet every human on board understood them. "You are not the first," the voice said, "and you will not be the last." Across the galaxy, every Terran and Imperial ship that remained received the same message. On Earth, the war room erupted in chaos. The scientist who had studied the Martian ruins stared at the data streaming in from the Resolute. "It's not a weapon," she said, her voice breaking. "It's a warden." The commander turned sharply. "A warden of what?" She hesitated, looking at the flickering hologram of the massive construct. "Of whatever's deeper. This was built to contain something worse." Meanwhile, in the drifting silence of space, the Resolute received a second transmission, encrypted, human-made. The officer decrypted it and froze. It was from Terran Command. "Activate Willfire immediately," the message read. "Priority 1. Her breath caught. "Sir, they've changed the order." The commander stared at the words for a long moment, then turned to her. "That's not command. Not anymore." The ship's sensors flickered again. Strange readings, human ships, dozens of them, appearing out of the void behind the Resolute. But they bore no known transponder codes. Their hulls were black, unmarked, built from designs that hadn't existed in any Terran database. The officer felt a chill run through her. "Those are ours," she whispered. "But from where?" The unknown fleet began transmitting on open channels. "Terran Command has fallen," a voice announced. "This is the new directorate. Project Willfire is under our control now." The commander's eyes darkened. "That can't be." But even as he spoke, the tactical display updated. Earth's defense grid had gone offline. Massive energy surges were rising from beneath the planet's surface. In the war room beneath Earth's oceans, alarms blared. The Supreme Commander stood in the chaos, surrounded by officers shouting over one another. "They've hijacked our systems!" one cried. "The project's powering up on its own!" The scientist tried to override the command lines, but the controls were already locked out. "It's not us anymore," she said. "Someone, or something, is using our network to activate it." Out in the Perseus Rift, the Resolute and the Shadow Fleet drifted before the living structure. It pulsed again, brighter this time, its voice returning. "You built the fire to destroy. We built it to contain. You do not understand what sleeps." The commander stepped forward, staring into the light as it grew until it filled every corner of the ship. "Then tell us," he said. The voice seemed to smile without sound. "You called yourselves free. Now you will see what freedom costs." Before anyone could react, the stars around them vanished, and for the first time the galaxy itself seemed to fold inward, as if something far older than war had just opened its eyes. The universe held its breath as the light swallowed everything. The Resolute hung suspended in a strange silence. No stars, no time, only the glow of the ancient structure pulsing around them. The crew floated in half-light, systems dead, hearts pounding. Then the voice came again, quieter now, closer. "You lit the fire. You woke what was meant to sleep." The commander forced his eyes open. "If this thing wanted to destroy us," he said, his voice raw, "it already would have." The tactical officer glanced at her console, faintly glowing with emergency power. Data streams flickered, readings that made no sense. "Sir," she whispered, "it's not attacking. It's showing us something." Images flooded the bridge, ghostly visions of ancient worlds burning, fleets made of light, civilizations wiped away. At the center of it all was the same spiral construct, standing against something vast and shapeless. The crew realized the truth together. The Warden wasn't their enemy. It had been fighting the same threat long before humanity ever existed. Back on Earth, the new Directorate's takeover unraveled. The Supreme Commander broke through the communication blockade, shouting into the static, "You're triggering the containment field! Shut it down!" But the signal came too late. Across the planet, Project Willfire reached full activation. The skies turned crimson as energy surged from deep beneath the crust, shooting through space like lightning. Every ship near the Resolute felt the blast ripple through the void. The ancient construct reacted instantly. Its spiral arms extended, wrapping around the blast as if trying to cage it. For a heartbeat, it worked. The structure absorbed the energy, stabilizing space around it. But the commander saw the readings. Its core was overloading. "It's breaking apart!" he shouted. The officer's voice shook. "If it fails, whatever it was containing gets out." The voice of the Warden filled their minds again, faint but clear. "One of you must choose. My strength ends here. Yours begins now." The commander turned toward the officer, eyes heavy with realization. "It's giving us control of the fire." The idea was madness. Willfire wasn't just a weapon, it was a star killer, a force meant to erase entire systems. But there was no other choice. If they didn't use it, the thing beneath the Warden's cage would awaken. He hesitated for only a second, then pressed his hand to the control surface. "By fire and will," he said quietly, echoing the command that started it all. The Resolute's core flared, linking with the Warden's dying systems. The galaxy lit up. Every Terran relay, every surviving ship feeding power into one blinding pulse. The explosion spread like dawn, a surge of white light sweeping across the void. When it faded, the stars returned. The construct was gone. The Imperial fleet had vanished completely, and the space where the Resolute once stood was empty. No wreckage, no signal, only silence. Weeks later, deep in Terran command, the recovered data told a strange story. The readings from the final transmission didn't show destruction. They showed containment. Something massive was sealed again, locked within a pocket of folded space. But in the final seconds of the recording, a single voice came through. Faint, human. "We stopped it. But it's still listening." The line went dead. No one could trace the source. Some believed the Resolute had survived, trapped inside the fold with the Warden. Others said humanity had become the new guardians of what once threatened the galaxy. And far beyond the edge of known space, in the quiet between stars, a faint spiral of light began to turn again, like a heartbeat waiting to rise. Months passed before the galaxy began to feel quiet again. The war that had consumed stars and lives ended not with victory, but with silence. Terran command slowly rebuilt from the ashes, its halls filled with new voices and fewer flags. The Empire had vanished completely, its worlds gone dark, its fleets erased from every chart. Only whispers remained, and in that quiet, humanity began to understand what survival truly meant. The Supreme Commander stood once more in the war room, now dim and half-repaired. Reports flickered across the holograms, colonies reaching out to one another, rebuilding trade routes, searching for signs of life in the sectors that had once burned. The scientist from the archives walked beside him, holding the last fragments of the Resolute's data logs. "They might still be out there," she said softly, "inside that fold of space." The commander nodded. "If they are, they bought the galaxy time. We'll honor that." Across the colonies, people began planting gardens where fortresses once stood. On Luna, the shipyards that had built weapons now forged vessels meant for exploration. Even the miners on Titan looked to the stars again, their drills silent as they watched the night sky shimmer with faint traces of the battle that had ended everything. Humanity had learned something the Empire never could. That will alone was not enough. To endure, there had to be purpose. To rebuild, there had to be hope. In one of the outer sectors, a small listening post detected an anomaly, a single pulse of light repeating at fixed intervals. It wasn't a distress signal, nor any known transmission. The technician on duty stared at it for hours, finally realizing what it was. A pattern. The same spiral the Warden had formed before the final blast. But this time, it pulsed gently, like a heartbeat. When she reported it, Command told her to log it and stand down. Yet she kept watching, whispering to herself, "They're not gone. They're still guarding us." The Terran Republic was no longer just a military force. It became something larger, a network of worlds bound not by control, but by shared memory. The phrase, "by fire and will," shifted from a call to war into a vow of unity. Schools taught about the Resolute not as a symbol of destruction, but as a story of choice, the moment humanity decided not to conquer, but to protect. Years later, the commander retired quietly, leaving no speeches or parades behind. On his last day, he stood outside the Terran archives and looked up at the sky. Somewhere beyond those stars, he imagined the Resolute still drifting within the fold, holding the line in eternal silence. "If they can hear us," he said quietly, "they'll know we kept our word." And in the vast distance, far beyond known space, something stirred in the dark, a glimmer of light spiraling softly, like a reminder that every end carries a trace of beginning. Humanity had forbidden the Empire, defied the impossible, and survived the fire not by strength, but by will. The galaxy was open again, but this time they would walk it differently, wiser, quieter, and finally free.